what is JavaScript, right? And that's so I'll just start from what is JavaScript, right? Introduction to JavaScript. So JavaScript is a simple language. Is an interpreted language, an interpreted high-level language. Okay. All right. So um, that's just the basic about like JavaScript, right? Okay. Let me before I throw more light on that, let me just talk about the topics, like the topics we are going to talk about today. So we'll see what is JavaScript, um, the JavaScript features, that's what things that come with JavaScript, what we can use JavaScript for, and the rest. Then we'll see some popular JavaScript frameworks, right? Then uses of JavaScript, what can we use JavaScript for? Where can JavaScript be applied? Then we'll talk a bit about um, Node.js. So what is Node.js? What makes Node.js a runtime environment? Some people say Node.js is a framework, but it's actually a runtime environment where you can run your frameworks. So we'll see more about what those things are, right? Okay, so let's go into it. What is JavaScript? Right. So JavaScript is a high-level, dynamic, and interpreted programming language. Okay. All right. So uh, we've seen three words there. It's high level, it's dynamic, and it's interpreted. So let me pick high level. When we say a language is high level language, what do we actually mean? We mean that that language, the syntax used in writing that language is closer to English language, or it's closer to the language which humans understand. Of course, we all know that programming language, sorry, computers understand binary, right? 01011000. That's like your binary, right? And then we have different levels of programming language. We have the assembly language, right? We have low level programming languages. We have high level programming languages, right? So JavaScript is amongst those high level programming languages. And also, and a key characteristics of high level programming languages is that high level programming language provide a layer of abstraction or several layers of abstractions to like hide some details of its inner workings from you. So you're just going to be concentrated on what to implement, not how what you're trying to implement is being worked on, like at the core, at its engine. So, for example, if you've written assembly language before, or you've written machine learning, this thing, program before, right? Something like that, you would find out that those languages, any assembly language or maybe machine language, they are just it's far more the level of abstraction is less. I don't know if you guys understand what I mean. Like what you're writing is just directly being kind of executed by um, the machine you're writing it on, right? But high level programming languages makes use of compilers, interpreters, and the rest, right? Then we say JavaScript is dynamic. So we have dynamically typed language, we have statically typed language. Okay. Now, when we say a language is dynamically typed, we mean that we don't necessarily need to declare that the data type for each variable we are going to use on that particular language. So let me give a classic example. I guess you guys are like following me. Okay, so let's look at Python, and Python is still dynamic too. So let's look at C, or let's say C++ and JavaScript. If you look at both languages, okay. So if I want to declare a variable in, and if you don't follow now, right? If you don't understand what I mean, right? What I'm trying to explain, don't worry. When we start writing programming languages, like when we start writing JavaScript, right? you're going to see how all these things play out. So let's go back to that analogy. We have C++, we have JavaScript, right? If you're declaring a variable in C++, you normally say int a is equals to 5, right? And what you simply said with that simple line of code is that the value of a will always be an integer, right? Must always be an integer. You can't change it to something else. But in JavaScript, you just simply write let a equals to 5, and later on you can change the value of a as a variable from being 5 to being something else. So it's dynamic, right? Then another characteristics of JavaScript, or yeah, let's say characteristics of JavaScript is that JavaScript is interpreted, which means there are also two kinds of language based on the way they are, like, should I say, compiled. So we have, or based on how they are executed, right? So we have interpreted languages and we have compiled languages. Again, we can put C++ and JavaScript side by side and compare them. Okay. Now, if you're executing something with C++, right? This is just like a high level example. When you are executing something with C++, you would normally first convert that what the code you've written from it's that's form from the source form, right? So that what you've written is the source code, right? You compile it, and then what will be the result would be an object code that your machine can understand. Okay, if you've written anything like C++ in the past, you would also notice that, right? You need to convert it from source code to object code. Then when that object code is produced, you execute the object code, right? So, but in terms of JavaScript is interpreted, which means the when you write a particular JavaScript code, right? All you need to do is just execute that code, right? It will be interpreted, which means the execution is just going to happen on time. Most people call it just in time compilation, JIT, just in time compilation. So it's what you've written as a JavaScript code is just at that same time, it's interpreted and it's executed like immediately. Okay, so that's the if someone asks what is JavaScript, you can give him this explanation. Just tell him JavaScript is a high level dynamic interpreted programming language. Okay, all right. So then let's see. Okay, I've broken down some of these things. Okay, so JavaScript has the following features. So JavaScript is dynamic. I've explained this. It's interpreted. I've explained this. It's cross-platform. So this cross-platform means that it's not just limited to a particular platform, right? You can run JavaScript on virtually like any platform, right? You can download a an app that can run JavaScript on your phone. You can run JavaScript on your Windows laptop. You can run it on your Linux laptop. You can run it on your MacBook, right? It's not limited to a particular platform. All right. Then um, another feature of JavaScript is it's event driven, right? So everything in JavaScript is event driven. So which means for something to happen, an event has to occur, right? An event has to occur. That event might be um, a socket request, or an HTTP um, call, or any of those things, right? So all those are like kind of events that occur for JavaScript to maybe execute. executes its code, right? Then we have that JavaScript is asynchronous. So there's synchronous call and then there's asynchronous, right? So when they say something is asynchronous, it means that um, it doesn't, it's not blocking by, it's not being blocked by maybe other events. Like for example, um, let me use uh, let me use a restaurant to explain how asynchronous call works, right? So if we create two restaurants, right, and the name of one restaurant is synchronous and the other one is asynchronous, this is how the synchronous restaurants would behave, right? So um, you have a queue of people, right? And then everybody is served on a first come, first serve basis. So when you go, you're being served. When you after you're being served, the person at your back is being served, and the person at your back can be served first before you, who is in the front, right? So it's it's done like kind of sequentially, right? But if we say like something is kind like something is asynchronous, or let's say the other restaurant, right? It's asynchronous, right? So people get served, right? Almost kind of at the same time, but based on when your particular order is going to be completed. Let's say five people come to a particular shop, right? All of them are being served kind of at the same time. So they take all of their orders, and then based on whose order is finished first, that is who is going to be served. So that's how like asynchronous programming works, right? So it doesn't block someone else. So if in an asynchronous sorry, in a synchronous program, the sequence at which things execute is kind of serially, right? But in an asynchronous program, it's based on um, which particular task finished first, right? So that's the difference between both of them. Then we also have that JavaScript has functional programming feature, so which means you can write your full programming just using functions. You don't need to declare like objects or classes. You can just use functions to just write your full program. So that's the concept of functional programming. Then you have that JavaScript 2 is object oriented, right? So you can create classes, you can create objects from those classes, you can inherit, um, you can do all those things that normal object oriented programming languages like Java, for example, or C++ can do, right? So JavaScript is object oriented. So it depends on what style of programming you would like, right? And then also it also depends on your the framework you would love to use. So like if you're someone that loves object oriented programming, then something like Nest.js would be more suitable for you. But if you like functional programming, then something like Express.js would be more suited for you. Okay. All right. So that's it for this part. Okay. Then so far, does anybody have any question? Okay. Does anybody have any question? All right. So I don't see any question there. So I guess I'll continue. Okay. So let's talk about some popular JavaScript frameworks and libraries. Okay. So we have jQuery, um, jQuery, Vue, React. So I guess you guys have seen most of this, right? Before. Um, okay, someone said I should explain the dynamic feature again. Okay, so when we say JavaScript is dynamic, what do when we say something is dynamic, what do we mean? Right? It means that thing is not static. It's open to change. Okay. So if they say something is static, it means it's just there. It's not open to moving or changing, right? Um, it's not open to change. It's just there, right? But when something is dynamic, it can change. It's open to change. It can be moved freely and the rest, right? But in terms of JavaScript, when we say JavaScript is dynamic, right? It has to do with its how its variables are being declared, right? So, and also how its functions return things too, because functions can you can make a function to return different stuff, right? Maybe a string, if something is true, else it should return an object and the rest, right? Dynamic. But then um, being dynamic just means that it can change its variable, the value of its variable. For example, I can say let a equals to 20 in JavaScript, and later I can come and say let I could say a should now be equals to true. JavaScript is not going to have an issue with that because JavaScript is dynamic. It first accepted a to have the value of 20, right? But then later on, it's I said a now should be equals to, let's say, true, right? So the first, when I say let a equals to 20, a at that point is an integer, right? But later on, I came and said let a equals to, let's say, true, true, for example, right? So that value of a being true now, true or false is a boolean, right? If people, for people that have already written programming before, right? So you can you can do that in JavaScript, right? But in a language like C++ or C, you when once you give a variable a type, right? You can't change it. And also, if you give a function a type, a return type, like maybe you execute something and you're expecting a string from a function, it means that that function always return back a string, right? But let's just say when we talk about it being dynamic, we are talking about, is it being strongly typed or is it being loosely typed, right? So that it has to do with type. So now that's one of the reasons why you have TypeScript, right? TypeScript is more strongly typed, right? It has strict types, but JavaScript doesn't have that. JavaScript is just dynamic there, just however you want to use it. Someone is not on mute. Sunny Sunday. So I'll be Solomon Sunday. Can you kindly mute? I guess there's someone else that is okay. Okay. All right. So um that's how far I could explain dynamic, how JavaScript is dynamic, right? So also, when we even talk about dynamic too, um, when you're declaring strings, right? Like a is equals to hello, right? Or let's say arrays too. You don't in JavaScript you don't necessarily need to specify the number of elements inside that array or inside that string, right? You just say a is equals to hello or a is equals to your array, right? And you can push into that array, you can remove from that array in JavaScript. So JavaScript doesn't have an issue. But you if you want to do that same thing in maybe it won't be as simple as you're doing it in JavaScript, because C++ will tell you when you're declaring, or let's say C will tell you you must always have to specify a number, right? To denote the number of elements you're going to have in your array, right? Or something like that. Or let's use C++, right? You need to specify a number of things that are supposed to be in your array, and then all of them must have the same type, right? But then in JavaScript, your arrays can accept whatever string, boolean, number, whatever you want to put in it, and then whatever you're putting in your string can whatever you put in your array, you can put. whatever number of things you want to put in your array, right? So um, okay, so that's how far I could explain it. I hope you get it. I hope you understand it, right? I hope there's no more other question. Is there any other question? Okay. If there's any other question, just drop it on the chat section. I'll see it. Okay, then. So let's move over to this part. So we have popular JavaScript frameworks and libraries. We have jQuery. We have Vue, React. So jQuery is a front end library. Vue is a framework. React is in between. Some say it's a framework. Some say it's a library. I would say it's a library. Yes. So jQuery, front end library, front end framework, front end library. Express is a back end framework, right? Next is a framework built with React in it. Next is the framework for sorry, Next is the framework built um, on top Vue, right? Then next is the framework built on top React, right? Then we have Nest. Nest is a backend framework too, right? But it's more object oriented, right? Meanwhile, Express accepts both. You can write object oriented Express, or you can just write it using your normal functions. Okay. Then we have Mongoose, one of my favorite libraries. Use it to connect to MongoDB to maybe query the database, right? Then Alatify is for front end to create beautiful alerts. We have Angular. Angular is also a front end uh, framework, right? Then Nodemon is used on Express is a library, right? It's used on Express to monitor change, to watch for changes. So we are concerned with using Express. Would use Mongoose. Would use Nodemon later on. But before we start using this, we need to understand how JavaScript works. Okay. All right. I hope there is no other question. Okay. Let's go on. So what can you use JavaScript for? All right. You can use JavaScript to create mobile apps. Okay. You can use JavaScript to create mobile apps. That's where React Native comes in. So there's a library called React Native you can install on your system. Then you can use it to um, create mobile apps. Okay. Okay. Then you I wanted to write creating of sites, right? Creating of websites, or let's say web apps. Yeah, web apps, React, Next, Vue, and Velvet, or websites, which is just HTML, CSS, right? Plus JavaScript, definitely. All right, so you can create websites, web apps with using JavaScript and its frameworks, or the frameworks concerned with JavaScript. So, of course, we know React, Next, Vue, all these are JavaScript frameworks and libraries that can be used to create web apps and websites. You can use HTML, CSS too, and JavaScript to create websites too. So you can't just use only JavaScript, right? You need to write it inside HTML or CSS. Sorry, you need to write it inside maybe your the file that's HTML is going to load your JavaScript file. CSS is also going to load. Sorry, HTML is going to load your JavaScript file, and HTML will also load your CSS file, right? So uh, you can't just use, like, let's say, just JavaScript. Even here, if you check your React public folder, you would see that there is an HTML folder inside there, which whatever you're writing is being injected into. All right, then you can use JavaScript to create desktop apps with a library called Electron, right? I think it's a library, or it's a framework, any of them, but it's called Electron. You can use that to create desktop apps. So you just write a normal HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Then after testing it, you're sure it works fine. You then package it to an Electron app. And I heard you can also package React or any other framework to an Electron desktop app. So Electron is just your is in a nutshell your browser, your V8 engine, but it's not running as a browser, but it's running in a window, right? That's what people say it is, right? Then you can use JavaScript to create APIs, but you would use that in conjunction with with frameworks like Express, Nest.js. There's also Happy.js, HAPI, Happy.js. You can use JavaScript to create APIs. And what are APIs, right? APIs are interfaces you can use to interact with a, a backend infrastructure, or let's say a database in a way. So take take APIs to be like waiters, right? Okay, so let me make this analogy too, right? These APIs, now APIs are also a kind of interface, right? We have GUI, which is graphical user interface, right? We have CLI, which is so. Let me talk about graphical user interface, right? Your computer screen, whatever you're seeing on your computer screen, like, right, what's the beautiful colors, the nav bar, or your start button, your tax bar, the windows and all those stuff, right? That's your GUI, right? Then when we talk about CLI, command line interface, right? We are referring to the your terminal, right? Your terminal. So um, in the olden days, before GUI came out, right, there was that CLI, and then anything you want to do on your system, you have to type the command for it. And if you don't know the command for it, then sorry for you. But then GUI came to make things simpler. But then we have API. So API is the short form for application program interface, right? So it makes it easier for an application somewhere to communicate with another application, right? So your front end is it might be an application running on React, right? But then your back end can be running on maybe Express, or it can even be another language, right? So because most people have this question of how is it that someone writes front end with React, and then the backend developer is using Python, and the two of them are communicating seamlessly. Well, what is sitting in between them is the API, right? So the backend developer writes his back end, like he writes his API, and then he writes a documentation. So the documentation is a document explaining how that that API works, right? So it tells you if you make this kind of request to this particular URL or to this particular endpoint with so and so input, this is what you will get as output, right? If you make so and so request, or if you make this request to this particular endpoint at this particular URL, this is the output, or this is the response you're going to get. Okay, so that is it. So the what the front end does is just it sent a response to the API. Then the API accepts that response, it analyzes it, it takes out what it needs, maybe the input it needs at that response, and then processes it, and then it sends an output, or it sends back a response back to the person that the or the application that sent in that request. So that's how APIs work. So you as a backend developer mostly you'll be designing APIs, right? You can use JavaScript for game development. Okay, so you can use Phaser, 3.js, Pixie.js, Babylon.js, and these are like 3D libraries for drawing the maybe the scene for your games and the rest. And there are also some other maybe libraries or frameworks that you also add with these 3D libraries. to maybe do some other things, right? Then you can use JavaScript to create browser extensions. So I know you guys are familiar with browser extensions. So there's this what you install on your browser. Some little should I say applications that just run only on your browser, right? Or they run on your browser. So you install them as an extension, right? And they help you maybe uh, carry out a particular task, on your browser easily. Like for example, there's this full page capture um, uh, extension which you can use to screenshot, like kind of screen grab a full website, right? So you install it as an extension on your browser, and then you can use it to do what it's meant to do, right? There are more of those extensions. Then also you can use JavaScript to automate tasks. So you can use JavaScript to pretty much maybe name bulk files. You can use JavaScript to maybe do those um, operating system tasks like that. Maybe things that you wanted to do manually, but it would have taken you too much time to do it manually, right? Like for example, you want to create 20 folders, for example, or 20 files, and then you want to input maybe content into those files, maybe from a particular website or something like that, kind of like automating um, something. You can use JavaScript to do that instead of maybe trying to do it manually. Try to create the 20 folders manually, maybe create the 20 files inside the 20 folders, and then try to do things, right? So you can use it to automate tasks. So that means you write code, you execute it on your Node.js runtime environment, and then that code just does what you want it to actually do. Okay, so let's move on. So I'm going to talk a bit about Node.js, and then why we even need Node.js too, right? So let me read what we have on our screen. Introduction to Node.js. Okay. Now, Node.js is an open source cross-platform JavaScript runtime environment that allows developer to run JavaScript code out of the web browser. Okay. So someone is saying, please explain the functions of JavaScript frameworks again. Okay. Okay, I've seen that question. Uh, Let me go over what JavaScript, the functions of JavaScript frameworks. Okay. All right. So now, okay, let me go back to that, right? Um, so I talked about Next, and Nest being frameworks, right? Okay. So um, what the uses of frameworks, right? Okay. Now there are some now it's possible to actually do without like frameworks, right? But that will mean you writing your own framework to use for a particular thing. Like let's take for example Next.js, for example. Now Next.js makes it more simple and secure to build a website, right, than just using your normal HTML and CSS, right? It makes it more secure. It makes it backward compatible with browsers and the rest of those things. Like all those little details that you might not know how to maybe figure out, or you might not even think about, right? So these frameworks help you fix it, and the frameworks also help you to fix security issues. Like for example, I know Next and React. Anytime you have an input, there is always a CSRF token generated for each input, and um, there are some security issues that are already fixed using these frameworks, right? Some fairly popular security issues that are fixed with these frameworks, most of them, right? So frameworks just help you to write better code, right? And then the other things that you don't want to be bothered about, or you might be ignorant about, the code can help you fix it, right? The framework can help you fix it. And then um, I also know people might also ask, what is the difference between a framework and a library, right? So I would also give an analogy, but I'll explain it to you too. Frameworks run your code, right? So frameworks run your code, but if you're using a library is just kind of like a helper to your code, right? It doesn't run your entire code, but it helps you an aspects of your code to maybe to do something, right? Or to carry out a particular task, right? That's the main difference between a library and a framework. So frameworks. So let me give you the analogy. A framework is just like a house that has pillars already, right? It has pillars already. You just need to put your walls, or let's just say if a framework is like an empty house, right? Everything is built, but there is no door, there is no window, there is no protector. Yours is just to come to that house, paint it the way you want it to be, and then put the protectors, put whatever you need in the house, bed and everything, and then from there you pack in. Those are how frameworks like work, right? They they run your code. So you have the framework, and then you write your code into that framework, and that framework runs, and then it manages your code, executes your code, and does the rest of the stuff, right? But if you're talking about a library, right, you have your own code, you run your own code comfortably, your code can run without that library, but then you need some certain aspects of that library to maybe do something on your code. So let's take, for example, um, let me give an example of a library. Okay, let's take this Alatify, right? Let's say I'm building a website with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? And then I want it that when the user is trying to log in, when he clicks on login, and then I make an API call, and then his account doesn't exist, an alert should come up that this account doesn't exist, right? Alatify can help me do that. So, but without Alatify, I can create my own alert, right? I can I can use the normal alert that comes with JavaScript to display a message that this account doesn't exist. But I just want to make it more beautiful. I can then go to use this Alatify as a library, right? I add it to my code, and I read the documentation for the library, and I use it, right? But let's take, for example, Nest.js, right? Nest.js runs everything about my code. It runs the router for my code. It runs the rendering of the pages, the individual pages on my code on to the browser. It runs it. It renders it does server-side rendering, so it renders the code on a server before sending it to the front end. What else? It manages the images, where the source I'm getting my images from, and all those stuff, right? What I just have to do is I need to create a pages. I need to I need to write my code into the framework, and then the framework helps me run my code, right? So that's the main difference between libraries and frameworks. So libraries are kind of like helpers. They have some things that they can help you with, but then you can do without them. You can use some part of them. But a framework is like okay, yeah, a framework is like what is running your full code, right? It's a set of so let's just say a set of a framework is just is an infrastructure or a set of code that runs it runs as a base code while you add yours, your what you want that framework to do on top. But then libraries just come as a helper. So your what you've written before is your code. Then you can pick one or two things from a library to like um to execute on your site or to add to your site. But that doesn't mean the library is running your own code, right? But the library just gives maybe help or one or two things that you want to do on your code, right? But it doesn't run your code. So libraries just come as a helper. Doesn't run your code. We're supposed to set up and all those stuff and just run want to add to it. Okay. I hope you guys might are following. Okay. Let's move on, right? So I was at Node.js. Okay, so Node.js is an open source cross-platform JavaScript runtime environment that allows developers to run JavaScript code outside of the web browser. Now, before Node.js came into the picture, right? Before we started using Node.js, JavaScript was just pretty much a um, a language that could be run on your browser. You just put it on your browser, run it on your browser, and that's all. You run all your commands on your browser, right? But that was also a limitation because you back before you couldn't use JavaScript to do a lot of things. You can't use JavaScript to change maybe properties of your OS or create a file or create a folder or do all those OS specific stuff. You couldn't use JavaScript to create a web server. You couldn't use JavaScript to create desktop apps and the rest, right? That was because JavaScript was just JavaScript was used on the browser only, right? That was only its kind of runtime environment by that time. So you could only execute JavaScript on the browser. So the um, creators or the people managing JavaScript saw that as a limitation. Why do we have to just only run JavaScript on the browser, right? Can't we have a runtime environment or let's say a place, an environment where this JavaScript can run that doesn't necessarily limit it to just being on the browser? So they picked V8. I hope you know V8 is the engine that runs on your browser. So anything that has to do with compiling your JavaScript or interpreting whatever code you want to run on your browser is the V8 engine that is that's for Chrome browser. For Chrome browser, it's your V8 engine that actually runs that. Okay, so they picked the V8 engine. They removed some certain things that has to do with the browser, like your DOM. They removed that in a way. Then they fixing some APIs that helped you interact that help Node.js interact with the system itself directly, right? Then they packaged that and they released it as Node.js, right? So Node.js is just it's not a framework, it's not a library, it's a runtime environment. It's like an environment where you can execute your JavaScript code that is not necessarily on your browser. It's outside your browser. Okay. So the same way Python has Python as its runtime environment, other languages have theirs too. So it's the same way you have your Node.js. Node.js is that runtime environment, and then you can run your Python. Sorry, you can run your Next.js um, on Node. You can run Express on Node. You can run Happy.js on your Node. You can run React React library. You can run it on your Node. So Node is just like that platform where you run whatever you want to run. Okay. So with all that being said, I've come to the end of today's class. I hope there is no question. Do you guys have any question to based on what I have shown, what I have talked about? um, in this class. Is there any question? Hello? I hope there's no question. So if there's no question,
No question from me.
okay, no question from you. Okay, you have a question.
I'm saying no question from me.
Okay,
Sorry, please,
okay.
I'm can I get the slide for this class?
Can you what?
Get the slide for the class.
Okay, you want to get the slides for the class?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. I'll make the slides available. I'll make the slides but not for future classes. I think it's after a class that you get the slides. But I won't. I'm not sure I'll be allowed to give you class slides for future classes, like classes that have not yet held. All right. So, but the slides are going to be available to everybody. Okay. Then also, I hope you guys have installed. Is there anybody that has issues with installing um, uh, VS Code or Node.js? Is there anybody that has that issue? Okay. So
Yes,
quickly.
please.
Okay. So what is your issue with installing it?
Oh, installing Node.js. I don't know. I think it's from I have VS Code already, but Node.js was giving me issue trying to. It wasn't downloading on my system.
Okay. So what you're using a Windows system, right?
Yes, a Windows system, please.
Okay. So a Windows OS. Sorry about that. Okay. So when this is how you do it. Okay. So I'm going to walk you guys through how to
All
do it.
right.
Okay.
Okay.
So uh, let me reshare my screen. So let me share this. I hope you guys can see.
Yes, we
Oh,
can.
okay. So if you search Node.js on your browser, you'll be
Yeah.
presented with this screen, right? You can just come and click on download here, right?
Okay.
So if you come to download, you would see, right? Uh, which version do you want to download? Is it a long term? LTS means long term support, right? Well, the
Yeah.
current version is like the current version. So LTS version means that, let's say, for a period of 6 months to 1 year, this particular version is like still going to be like very valid, right? It's
Okay.
going to, yeah, it's going to be. But then this long-term support version doesn't mean it's actually the recent version of Node.js. So you most times always have to go for the current version, right?
Okay.
Yes. Then based on your OS, right? You choose, is your OS a 32-bit version or a 64-bit version
Is
or ARM 64 bit ARM 64 version. Okay.
okay.
So
Yeah.
if you want to know the difference between both of these, when you go to my computer where it used to show your hard disks, right?
Yeah.
On any empty space, right click and click on properties. It will then show you uh, the properties of your system. So it will show you
Okay.
if your system OS is a 32-bit OS or if it's a 64-bit OS, then you would know which particular one. So when you know it, mostly it will always be a 64-bit OS.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what you're going to use. For those using Windows, you'll always use the MSI installer. This Windows, so it's going to be nodejs.msi, right? That's how it's going to come. Okay, don't worry about this binary zip version. Just go for the MSI version. For those that are using Mac OS, you would use this dot pkg, or you can use star.gz. Then for Linux is just 64-bit here. So for Linux, you mostly use this particular one, right? So then if you want to try, if you're not using any of that, maybe Linux on LA system, whatever this is, you can always try these other ones, right? But then this is
Okay.
what you would use for Windows.
Okay.
uh Then after installing that, you install VS Code.
Okay.
So if you search for VS Code download, you for people that don't know how to do it, you just this first link to download Visual Studio Code. You would see for Windows, for Linux, and for Mac. You If you're using Windows, you go for Windows, right? So that's how you set those up, right? Then for people that might be using their phone, because I guess we need to accommodate everybody, but the prerequisites for this class is you should have a laptop, right? But for people that for maybe, I don't know, for any reason you don't have access to a laptop, right? Maybe directly or for a temporary time, you can use replit.com, replit.com, right? Now, when you sign up on this site, right, you'll be presented with maybe this kind of screen or a similar screen after signing up. Then you can come and create a REPL. So if you click create REPL, it will ask you what kind of REPL do you want to create, right? And since we are doing JavaScript, we want to just learn JavaScript, you would create a Node.js REPL. So you just click Node.js, and don't worry about any of those. So don't worry about the templates. After choosing Node.js, you just simply come here and you choose a name. I could call this CodeCamp, CodeCamp _3.0, something like that. Then once you click create REPL, it is going to create that environment for you, which you can use to execute your code. So this is how you execute your code. For example, um, console.log. I want to log out something. So console.log is a command used to log out um, maybe information or any maybe set of characters or whatever you want to log out, right? So I want to just run my first ever program, although this is not my first ever program. But if you want to do it, you can follow up. So I'll just write um, hello world, right? And then if you want to run it, you come and click this run button, or you press Control and enter. Once you click the run button, it's going to show you the result at this other side of the screen. So this part of the screen is like the part for your console, which is where your the result um, of your code will show, right? Then this part is where this middle portion is where you're going to type your code out, right? You can type what you want to execute, right? Then this part is like your file navigation part, right? So this is where you're going to see any file you've created or the files you're working with, right? So I'm working with index.js now, so that's why it's active here. It's active. So you that's how this works, right? So this is the environment. Then if you're using VS Code, right? So um, let me see. Let me launch my uh, let me launch my terminal and show you guys something. So to confirm that To confirm that your node is installed properly. Okay, someone is asking if you can use code block, right? If code block executes JavaScript, right? If it has that environment where you can type and execute your JavaScript, then you can also use code block, right? Okay, so someone is asking about JavaScript strings, arrays, layers. What are layers? But um, we would talk about strings. We'll talk about all these are data types, right? Strings, arrays, and the rest are data types, right? So we'll talk about that in our next class, right? Okay. Mm, okay. So you need course outline too. Okay. Then that will also be available. Okay. So someone is asking how it would look like if it's installed. Okay. Okay, okay, all right. So, can we use code block? Someone says I should define most of the terms I'm using. Okay, okay, because he can't relate. Cool, cool, cool. Okay, I'm taking note of all these things. Can we use code block? I already answered that. What extension do you advise to download on our VS Code? Okay, I think I'll take these questions one by one because they are just coming in. Okay, so let me share. Let me first share my terminal. Can you guys see my terminal? Hello.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
we can see it.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So if you want to confirm if after installing your Node.js, you want to confirm if your Node.js has successfully installed, you just simply type on your terminal or on your command prompt. I think it's called command prompt on Windows, right? I'll type node, then I'll write dash dash, or you call it minus sign or hyphen hyphen, then you write version. So if it presents you with something like this 16.14.0 v16.14, not really, it might not be v16.14.0, but it should show a version number like this or similar to this, right? If you see something like this, then congratulations, your Node.js is installed like successfully. But if it doesn't show this way, then it's definitely means that your VS Code didn't install well. So you would try this out, okay? Then for the person that asked about the different terms and all those stuff, right? Well, I'm going to explain those terms in our next class because I know that it's not everybody here that has written a line of code. Some people here haven't written even a single line of code before, and it's fine. You will get to learn, right, how to write this syntax and what they mean, right? So I'm going to do that in our subsequent classes, but this class is just an introductory class, right? So you can, if you find any other thing maybe confusing, let's say I what I explained, maybe dynamic type language or any other thing, after the call you can always uh, talk about it, like ask your question on the Discord channel. Don't forget that you can always do that on the Discord channel. Discord channel is always going to be there. Then um let someone asked about the extensions that we can use on VS Code, right? So let me open up my VS Code and take you guys there so you we can maybe filter out, see which and which you guys should install. But pretty much it's not a, now this is not a requirement, right? the extensions are not a requirement, but if you want to use them, right, they would help too. They would help definitely, but it's not a requirement. I'm not saying you must have it, right? So let me share. Hello, hello.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know you can hear me, but can you see my VS Code?
Yes,
Can
now
you
we
see
can
my
see you.
screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. So if we go over to extensions, uh, I'll just you can install Prettier, right? So Prettier just makes your it makes your code formatting. It's used for formatting your code, right? So formatting is just like arranging your code, right, in a way that really makes sense. You can install Prettier, cool, yes. Then um, what else? You can install this one, JavaScript ES6 code snippets. You can just install it too. So this one gives like suggestions for maybe short snippets of code. So snippets are just like just saying short suggestions kind of for code, right? And you can always read about more details to what these libraries are or these extensions are doing here, right? You can read more about them, how they are being used. So if I want to write uh, uh, this imports to import an entire module, right? I could just write IMP, something like that, and then it would know what to do. IMN is to import animate.css. IMD. You can just read about each of these things. If I want to create require, I just write RQR, all those stuff. I know most people I might not be able to relate, right? Most people are not, and it's fine. It's fine. We are going to learn about each and every of these things, right? We are going to learn about each and every one of them. Okay. So, but you can install those two you can install so the what where are they again? I said JavaScript ES code snippets. You can write it down, JavaScript ES6 code snippets. Okay. And then where is the other one? um you can also install Prettier. Yeah, it's called Prettier. Yes, Prettier code formatter, right? So those are the two that if you would want to install, but they are not necessary, like they are not required. You can do without them. Okay. So uh that's for that particular aspect. Okay. So someone is asking what is the name of my terminal. Well, I use Bash, and forgive me, I'm not using Windows, but definitely you guys would still follow along. So I am not using a Windows operating system. I'm using a Linux based operating system. So it might look a little bit different from Windows, right? But you can always follow along with what I'm doing. You can always follow along. Okay. So let's go on. Okay, someone showed his DA card showed that his own is showing version 18.17.0. Wow, cool, nice, that's beautiful. Okay, so um okay, someone is asking for the course outline so that we can prepare before the class. Okay, all right. Okay, so I'll make that available. Yes, I'll make that available. What's okay? What VS Code extensions? Okay. Um, code block. I haven't really used code block, but I'll try it out and I'll see if it's okay. But if you can run JavaScript on it, then definitely you can do that. All right. So, is there any other question? Is there any other question anybody has? Right? Oh, someone asked, what is the name of the environment you were working before you moved to VS Code Editor? Okay. You environment. What you mean this? Yeah. Who asked this question? Um, Sorry if I don't pronounce your name properly. Is it Farinde Babajide? You asked, is this the environment you're referring to? Okay, he's talking about the site. The site. Are you talking about the site I used earlier?
Yes, I'm talking about the site that you like console.log.
Okay, the site that you can write your code with, right? Is
Yeah,
it?
yes.
Okay. Okay. So the name of the
Okay,
site is,
this one.
yes. The name of the site is Repel, REPLIT.com. Okay. REPLIT.com. Now, apart from repelit.com, there are other sites online which you can definitely use to run your code. Okay. There are plenty others out there, right? But my personal favorite is Repel, Replit, Replit.com. Okay. So in case you maybe you're not with a system or a laptop immediately days class, maybe you can't get to your system immediately. You can just you use replace.com on your phone to follow along if you necessarily need to type the code out. And also, you learn coding by doing it, right? You don't learn coding by just watching me type the code, right? As I'm typing a code and I'm explaining it, I also expect that you should also try that code out, right? You can also try it out, see what results it gives you, and then while you're listening to me, see what results it gives you, how you typed it, if you typed it well, if you didn't type it well, look for a way to correct yourself, compare your code with mine, make it um, make it interesting for yourself so that when you come to class you always find out that there's something to learn, right? So if you just watch me all along trying coding and there, because we will do a lot of coding, right? We would code a lot. So if you just watch without trying out anything, you might not maybe understand or remember some things that I might show because you didn't try them out on your own. But trying it out on your own would open you up to maybe making some mistakes and then trying to correct yourself, and then you won't make those kind of mistakes anymore because you've corrected yourself maybe that very first time of making that mistake. Okay. Okay. Okay, so Song said that code blocks is primarily integrated development for C and C++ programming languages. Okay. Um, okay. So which means you can't use that to run JavaScript, right? Okay. So, which do you advise us to use in this course? Okay. Um, well, use VS Code. Use VS Code with the node, but also um, why I'm talking about Replit.com is that you might not um, you might not really have access to a laptop, you know, at a particular time, and then um, maybe setting up something like Temox might be there's what is called Temox. Temox is like your terminal for your phone, but setting that up might be a little difficult, right, for people. So, but the simplest way to actually maybe set up an environment that you can run your JavaScript code is using Replit on your phone. But if you're on a laptop, I would recommend that you should use your VS Code and Node.js to run your code. Okay. So always use just mainly they just use your system, right? Your system, just use your PC for your Node.js classes, right? Just use it. But then if you don't have access to your system, that's when you might want to use the others. Okay. So I hope there's no other question. Is there any other question? Someone is asking, does typing speed matter in coding? Well, you need to be able to type fast. That one is true. Yes, somewhat true, because uh, if you can't type fast, it will also tell on your productivity, because typing slowly will increase the time of you getting tasks done. So you should also be able. I don't mean you should. You should. I'm not saying you should be able to type like very fast, like be able to type a paragraph in 2 seconds. But your speech should be at least fair enough, right? You should be able to. You should be able to type like up to 10, 20 letters in 2 seconds, or let's say 5 letters in 2 seconds. Make it fast, like at least not too slow. Okay, someone is saying code codesandbox.io is also good for Node.js. Okay, I haven't tried Code Sandbox, but if you can run your JavaScript on it, right, it's fine. It's also fine. If it's possible to run that, then it's fine. Okay. Uh, I hope there is no other question. Is there any other question? No other question. All right. So you guys should get ready. On Thursday, we will write some code. We will also see how stuff works, right? See how JavaScript works. Whatever you didn't understand in the next class, I would break them down. I would show you how everything works, right? You're going to be required to try carry out the exercises that I'm going to show you, and then I'll also ask your questions and also make it interactive and interesting for yourself. Okay, so okay, so but for this cohort we are going to use Node.js, right? Let me go back to that. We are going to use Node.js and VS Code. Yes, that's the standard, right? It's going to be that. Just it's going to be Node.js and VS Code, right? The rest are just like kind of suggestions, but what we would use, right? What we are going to use, what I'm personally going to use is going to be Node.js, right? And um and VS Code. Okay, do we need a GitHub account? Yes, yes, definitely, definitely. You will need a GitHub account. Yes, right. So if you don't have a GitHub account, head to github.com and then create your account, create your GitHub account. Okay, create your GitHub account there. All right. So on that note, I'll round up today's class. So over to you, Mr. Ikechukwu.
Okay, thank you, Victor. I think this class was an interesting one, right? So, like he actually said, I get the suggestions that we are all saying, but there is a standard, right, of which that's VS Code, and of course for the whole Node.js track. So please make sure you download your VS Code. I've heard a lot of code blocks and that. That's fine. Those are alternatives, but that is not the prerequisite. So every one of you should, of course, get your VS Code downloaded and get your GitHub. Of course, that's I didn't even expect that question, but whichever ways, of course, you should have a GitHub account as a developer. You should have one, right? So, but I think that's basically that. So Victor, that's over to you. You can end the class. Thank you very much. See you guys on the workspace.
All right. Bye bye. Bye bye. See you on Thursday by 2 o'clock, right? All right. So till Thursday. And if you have any question, please ask it on the Discord channel, right? On my channel, on the Node.js channel, right? All right. So bye bye.